Hey.
Great. So the agenda was posted, I think, before some folks joined the meeting. I don't know, Nicole, if you want to resend that just so that everyone has that. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started with our Programs and Services Subcommittee meeting with introductions and any announcements that you might have. Yesterday was our CAB, our Community Advisory Board meeting, and so we're having this meeting today. The CAB meeting had been moved because of the Veterans holiday, and so yeah, that meeting is fresh in our minds, and we have the agenda posted there. I can go ahead and start with my introduction, and I can also share my announcement that I shared at the CAB meeting yesterday as well. So I am Lila Blanchard. I am the Vice Chair of the Programs and Services Subcommittee, and this is my second year on the CAB board. And Nicole Green, who is the chair, couldn't join us today. And so I'll be facilitating this meeting, and I will put a link into our stepping stone ceremony, which we hold monthly, which is going to be a really fun celebration of our re-entry participants, as well as parents or guardians who will be celebrating the completion of their workshops. So I will Nicole, would you like to call down the rest of the folks first on the subcommittee and then other folks?
Sure. Dr. Hernandez.
Hi, my name is Dr. Michelle Hernandez. This is my second year on CAB, and I'm a clinical psychologist in the county, specializing in disability and forensics and PTSD. So it's good to be here.
Dale.
Yeah, Dale Harrington. I'm going to be a member of CAB as of January the 1st. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm also involved in some Contra Costa County agency, area agency on aging.
Lila, you introduced yourself, right? Yeah, okay. Jana.
Good morning, everybody. Janet Evans with the County Office of Education with the Game Plan for Success reentry programs inside the jails. We made this announcement earlier, but I'm not sure if we made it in every subgroup, subcommittee, but we're back in the facilities now as a reentry team. We're able to see folks face to face who are vaccinated and folks in the visiting center behind the glass who are not vaccinated to make sure that they get their reentry transition plans and the services that they're being connected to, schedule appointments with Daryl, our employment specialist, and the outside reentry coaches to have meetings once they're released. So it's nice to be able to see folks in person again. They were just as excited as us when we went to see them because we haven't been here for 16 months, something like that. So it's nice to be back. Also on the school side of things, we have started doing the CASAS testing again with students who are enrolled in school. And then the next step in the near future is to do GED high set testing with individuals as well. So stepping stones to getting back to where we were as far as having classes provided, but we're starting with reentry, CASAS testing, and high set GED testing.
Is it possible, I'm not as familiar with those type of tests, if you would post that verbiage in the chat, just so I can record that.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you. Patrice.
Hi all, Patrice Guillory here from the Office of Reentry and Justice.
And I don't know if Monique, I think she had to step away for a second. She's back. Otherwise, I'm Nicole Popchek also with the Office of Reentry and Justice. And there's Monique. Monique, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, I'm Monique Tate with the Office of Reentry and Justice. Thank you.
Thank you for those welcome and introductions. And I see that Dale Harrington has his hand up. Dale, did you have something you wanted to mention?
I just have a question for Jana. Jana, when you weren't able to go into the jail, were the inmates able to participate in any education at all?
Yeah, so the process we went through for those months was a paper pencil packet exchange. So every class we offered prior to the pandemic was offered through a paper packet exchange. And then our reentry program turned into a 20 module packet exchange as well that taught them about all the services available in the county, how to get their IDs, how to get their social security cards, how to write a resume, how to do their interviews. So we did all that through paper packet exchange. And some of that is still happening since there are no full in-person classes at the moment. But we didn't just stop. We continued the education process through paper packets.
Were any of them able to participate in Zoom meetings? At all?
Not as far as education goes. They were doing visiting via Zoom.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any public comment on any item under the jurisdiction of the Community Advisory Board and not on this agenda? So hearing none, let's move on to the approval of the minutes from the October 21st, 2021 CAB Programs and Services Subcommittee meeting. And that is part of the agenda packet, which is attached as well, page 4 to 9.
I so move.
I second.
Thank you. There's only 3 of us, so Nicole, can you run us through?
You guys are quick today. Okay. Lila,
Aye.
Dr. Hernandez,
Aye.
Dale,
Aye.
motion passes unanimously.
Excellent, thank you. So our next item on the agenda is to discuss and update the work plan for proposed housing recommendations. And we have an attachment there. Let's see here.
Page 11.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, probably page 10.
Page 10.
Oh, well, this is the work plan, but
Thank you for pulling that up. Okay, let's take a moment for us to, square ourselves with the work plan. Whether we can see it here on the screen or whether we've had it pulled up on another device. I feel like this might have been one of the agenda items that Nicole was tracking more closely, but let's review what's on there and let's see if we have anything that we would like to add to our work plan regarding housing or regarding other steps. Anything, Monique or Nicole, that you'd like to add on this agenda point? Or am I capturing what the intention of what we had decided?
I believe, I mean, my understanding from last time is that housing might become the research project next time, as opposed to restorative justice, but I was not positive on that.
Got it. Thank you.
That's
Monique?
my understanding as well. And I think I gave you all a couple of resources to see what data has already happened around housing. And it was my understanding that you were going to talk about it with the committee.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you. Any comments or questions from Dr. Hernandez or from Dale before we dive in to see if there are any updates to the work plan as written? All right, well, I would recommend adding in under research projects and advocacy and support of CAB policy platform. Another point that states a possible suggestion for a housing research paper for the next year. Any comments or questions about that update?
What
I do.
what would be the focus, Lila?
Okay, so focus, that's one question. And Nicole, you had another question?
I think it was Patrice that had a question.
Sorry about that. I saw your name light up. Patrice, did you have another question?
Not a question, more of a comment. So just wanted to remind the committee members that this is a 2021 work plan. And so when we move over into the new year, there will be an opportunity to update or create new work plans for the upcoming year during your retreats. So if you feel as though, even though this might be an important issue for the committee, if you feel as though it might be pertinent to wait and maybe deliberate a little bit more during the retreat, so that way as folks are shifting around, you know, might be joining new committees or what have you, at least it's something that can be raised for the full body during the retreat, and then you decide from there where the work around housing can land. I think there's also, given the news that Jill shared yesterday, Jill Ray from Supervisor Candace Anderson's office shared about Measure X and the increase in the Housing Trust Fund, which is hugely significant. I think that there's probably more work or research that can be done to know how those resources would be dispersed out in the community, and if there is an interest in ensuring that certain populations, such as those who are justice involved, have some connection to whatever comes from those resources. So housing seems to be bubbling up pretty significantly, just generally speaking, and that it might be worth it to reserve, you know, doing further work around this for the upcoming year. So you can kind of get a sense of what's going on in the landscape around housing that can impact, you know, the justice initiatives. So just a thought.
Thank you for that, Patrice, and for your question as well, Dale. I feel like they're very intertwined. So, you know, there's two ways that we could go with this. We can update this work plan so that it also serves as, you know, a launch pad for the next, you know, subcommittee year. That's the direction that I was leaning in. So really just tying up the work that we've done and having that be a document that can be reviewed for the next year. And so, you know, we don't have the scope of our work with the housing, next year. We don't have a recommendation, and, the next subcommittee will be, developing that next year and identifying. So do we want to put a suggestion in this document to, to identify housing advocacy, or, to really to define the scope of what our what the subcommittee wants to do around housing and how it can interface with other work that's already happening? Would that work? And that question is for Dale and for Dr. Hernandez. Go ahead, Dale.
Well, I don't have a reaction to your last question. I have a question for Patrice. Patrice, at what point would we identify how we are going to stay in touch with the Measure X funds for housing? How do we stay in touch with what's being done?
I know I can personally check in to see how that community advisory board, so they're also a CAB, how they're planning to stay in operation now that recommendations have been made and have been approved by the board. So I'm not, at this moment, I'm not quite sure what the next steps will be, but I can check on that for you guys and bring that back.
I'm just wondering if we might have some obligation, to stay in touch, and whether we're monitoring anything or just at least staying in touch with it.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have an obligation
Right.
to
Right.
be in touch with them. I believe, as Jill mentioned, that once those funds have been approved by the board, then they will fall directly to the respective departments. So I assume the funding that's having to do with the housing trust fund is going to be administered by H3, which is a great partner, not only to ORJ, but to CCP and the CAB and all things AB 109. So we can always reach out to the staff there to see if there's some insight that they can give us with regards to that piece and how they're going to utilize those extra dollars, and how does the housing trust fund work and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
Great question, and thank you for sharing that information, Patrice. So, we can update the work plan, or we can leave it as is. There will also be a document that's going to be coming out with recommendations for the next year's subcommittee. So, yeah, Dr. Hernandez and Dale, would you prefer to leave this document as is and provide a suggestion of further research and work around housing for the next subcommittee and the recommendations?
Yes, that's my preference.
Okay.
Yeah, I concur. I think that's great.
All right, wonderful. We'll go with that then. And I feel like our work plan, can stand as is. I don't believe that housing is mentioned anywhere, specifically in there. But unless there are any last questions or updates to the work plan, we will move on to our standing agenda item for restorative justice. Great, let's do that.
Monique's going to start sharing on my behalf because I will have to leave early to get to the next meeting that we're staffed to. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Monique.
And I have a question though, before we move on to the next item.
Okay.
So since this was a voting item and you all agreed to not update it, do you need to vote Or should that just be taken off, modified?
No, it just means that no action was taken.
Okay, thank you.
And just so you, my understanding is you can take a vote on an item, even if it doesn't have the word vote next to it. It's just more to guide the body to that there was an intention to, but you don't have to.
I understand it a little bit differently, so we can check in to get clarification on that. But at the very least, the items that are marked as a vote, you know, you don't have to take action on, and if you don't take action, we'll just, yeah, identify it as such.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that. So let's ground ourselves in the policy brief recommendations. So Monique, thank you so much for helping us scroll there. And if you have that on some other documents, that is going to be pages 11 to 16. Okay. Let me make sure I am at the right place. So this is attachment number 3, and it also says at the top of the corner, page 27 of 30 from a meeting in 2018. Are we tracking with the correct document, Monique and Nicole?
This was the recommendation from CAB in regards of restorative justice in 2018. And so we included that because that was what, I think it was what we had included from the previous meeting, was just a summary of the recommendations in regards to restorative justice from 2018 CAB, and then also pulling together your recommendations. If that was not the intent to show it this time, I apologize, but this was, the intent here was to show where CAB landed in 2018 on next steps, and to align our recommendations for 2021, adding to that or subtracting.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So yes, I wanted to make sure that everyone on the subcommittee had a time to review that document and read through it and see that, you know, this is not the first time that our subcommittee had, you know, taken some time to learn more about restorative justice. And so it is helpful to have both of those documents side by side. You know, we can focus in on the present and the future, and this document that that Monique has highlighted for us here, the summary of restorative justice exploration. But first, I wanted to see if there were any questions or comments regarding the prior document, you know, from the past. I'll save my brief comments on that document to see if anyone has anything they'd like to mention first. Okay, great. So I appreciated how they, you know, defined, and this is on the first page of that document. They spent some time defining their scope and, you know, what they were describing, and some of the programs that they had investigated and taken a look at and learned about. You know, I thought that it was, you know, good that they had some lessons learned in RJ implementation about, you know, victims being centered, you know, making it a safe place for dissent, and, you know, really laying the groundwork and, restorative justice practitioners being knowledgeable. And so, I know that sometimes there's a lot of excitement, enthusiasm around restorative justice, but not a lot of folks have actually taken part in it. And so they had some lessons learned in implementing our restorative justice that they shared there. And then they had a diagram of some of the different places that were actually active and involved in restorative justice. And we had this same collective come back to us and speak at the beginning of our year, which was interesting. So a little bit of, an update and a refresh there. And then there had recommended steps to expand RJ awareness and use. And wanted to see a countywide RJ platform, and they actually suggested presenting a committee or forming a committee to focus on that. So that's a brief review of that prior document there. Let me just come back to my Zoom and zoom in with folks. Anything else that stood out to you that you'd like to highlight or ask about? We may or may not have the answers, but we can certainly discuss.
Seems very, very comprehensive to me.
That's right. Yeah, it was, I think that's an example of a white paper or research paper that could come out of this subcommittee. And so now we can scroll down to our document from this year, which is is basically a summary of the work that we've done so far this year. That chat program that I just identified, the Collective Healing and Transformation Project, presented at one of our meetings earlier in the year, and as did Community Works West. Chat is a collaborative for folks with domestic violence issues, and victims can identify the desire to be in a restorative justice circle. Community Works West does a restorative justice circle at the Reentry Success Center, and they spoke quite a bit about their program in San Francisco, providing programs and services with a restorative justice ethos throughout to young folks who were formerly incarcerated. And we've also had, can you scroll down a little bit? Mark Thomas discussed the San Francisco Sheriff's Department implemented restorative justice programs. He pulled up their website and we spoke about that. And the takeaway for me was that they had circles actively that were being offered, within their carceral facilities in San Francisco. I'll pause there. Anybody want to add anything from presentations this year around restorative justice that we're missing? Oh, great. Let's proceed. So we also had information shared. Oh, sorry. Can we go back up? Regarding the Restorative Justice Diversion Program partnership with Contra Costa County and District Attorney and RISE Center for Transitional Age Youth. I believe, was there anything that Nicole or Monique wanted to add on that? I know at our last meeting, Nicole, you posted in an update from that program.
Well, I think that posting was it. The highlight for me just in that presentation, and I recommend folks watch it. It was recorded and posted. Happy to provide that link about the neighboring courts that are still kind of in the works in planning phase, I guess, with the district attorney that would incorporate restorative justice practices in regards to that process. and Patrice can probably speak more, articulate that better than I can, but that was the highlight. And then that TAY services, or TAY Restorative Justice Services was in the works, or at least earmarked, but nothing yet. But that was an initiative that the district attorney was interested in exploring.
And the only thing I'll add is that I like how when Mark did the presentation, he talked about the how the definitions or the terms are interchanged. And he basically explained it a little further for us to understand it. And I like that he referenced different school districts that have restorative justice practices, some that have continued and some that have discontinued. But I do like that he provided evidence of it being implemented in different educational settings.
Thank you so much, Monique. Dale, I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah, would it be within our purview to recommend to whatever body would be necessary for funding or earmarking funding for restorative justice? Whether we think maybe there should be some additional resources?
You know, I think that that could be within the purview if that's what we decide. I mean, I think that we are kind of at the point where the official recommendations have already been passed on. And so these would be like verbal requests or information that we would, you know, pass on and ask the next subcommittee to advocate on behalf of. Patrice, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Dale's question there. So in your policy brief, you did, generally speaking, requested that restorative justice be something that the CCP takes a look at, developing an inventory of where restorative justice programs are currently happening in the county, and you know, encouraging agencies to sort of take lead in incorporating that, as well as what was it? Having restorative circles in the county detention facilities. So I would say that at the next CCP meeting, you can, or in future meetings, because they did mention that they were going to agendize your recommendations for the next year's CCP meeting schedule. You can certainly dive in deep there and make more of a stronger pitch, if you will, for greater support, whether it be through investments, whether it be through some sort of assessment or inventory of restorative justice programming, but essentially that you would like to see the body take a little bit more of a lead role in ensuring that the proliferation of restorative practices and restorative justice programs is taking place all throughout the county. So that can be, so it is within your purview, and you certainly can make a recommendation for AB 109 funding to that funding can be set aside for either procuring that service through the community programs, or that individual county agencies take a lead role in it, and maybe for them to make that request in their own budgets. The other thing I want to mention is that for the Measure X CAB as well, I believe that there were a couple of restorative justice related projects that were recommended. I do not know for certain if funding was actually allocated and approved for restorative justice programs through Measure X funding. That's something like we can look into. It was quite a number of things that got approved. And if you can also recall, Jill mentioned the other day that $7 million is still left on the table that has been unassigned. So that's a potential opportunity as well. And then just to piggyback on Nicole's point with the district attorney's office, DA Becton did make a request for Measure X dollars to be expended for restorative justice programming for transitional age youth. So again, I don't know if that actually happened, if it came down, we can look into it, but we certainly do have some avenues, whether you want to take action for this next December meeting or, you know, at least for CCP, or wait for when they will agendize your restorative justice recommendation for a future meeting. You can certainly do a lot of prep work leading up to that to make a very firm request.
Well, it's easy for us to find the amount of money that's allocated through Measure X, but then there may be grants floating all over the place for various organizations, and money has been allocated, but you'd have to look at each organization. There's probably isn't a central document that identifies that.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I agree with you. And I think that's why the CCP meeting is actually a great place to start, because you have all your department heads there, and there can certainly be conversation or discussion among each of them to say, actually, we're doing RJ, you know, and this is how we're rolling it out, such as like the DA is doing. You know, sheriff's office might be considering it, but who knows, or they may say, you know, actually we're allowing, once we open up the jails for programs to come back in, we're allowing for folks to do circles in here, or, you know, H3 may say something else, AODS may say something else. So that might be an opportunity to at least have the conversation start, to hear from each of them, from the department heads, of what RJ practices or programs they have going on, or at least looking into.
Yeah, excellent. Yes.
Yeah, and the restorative justice point from our policy talking points in our ambassador meeting with the sheriff came up. You know, one of the folks on the sheriff's staff, you know, asked, what are you all envisioning as far as diversion or as far as restorative justice? And so I, you know, shared a little bit of work from our subcommittee, and the idea that San Francisco, you know, has restorative justice circles happening, you know, within their facilities for folks who are incarcerated. And, you know, that there is also room for growth within our county for more reentry programs and county departments to have resources for restorative justice practices. I know we're kind of moving a little bit into our definitions piece, but we'll get there shortly. So I wanted to just add that brief, you know, conversation that came up with the sheriff's office. And, you know, in the prior report, they actually recommended some type of committee around restorative justice. And, you know, with these different you know, departments and committees expressing interest in restorative justice, I, you know, wonder if, you know, there's a question of funding, and then there's also the question of holding the work and organizing the work. So I hear from you, Dale, that you're interested in advocating for funding. Anybody want to speak to our role in advocating for funding and or a recommendation we might want to make to the future subcommittee or to the county about additional structure in order to bring this together? So yeah, sometimes my questions can get really long. I apologize. I'll wrap that one back up. What do folks think about the idea and the request in the prior report from 2018 that requested a committee? And do we know why that didn't happen?
What was the request again from the prior committee?
It was to form a countywide committee to focus on restorative justice solutions.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense to me because that would help to keep a focus on the importance of it. And then also the committee could set out a document that clearly identified the advantage of restorative justice and keep that before people's minds that make funding decisions.
Thank you, Dale. Michelle, anything that you want to add of whether you think a committee is a good way to go beyond outside, a recommendation for the next programs and services subcommittee to do what they would like with restorative justice in respect to restorative justice?
I think it makes sense to have a committee, and I kind of like what you said. I don't understand why it didn't happen, because I guess I haven't been on the subcommittee that, long enough, but I'm curious to know if that was even initiated and if there's anybody left on CAB that had a part to do with it, that maybe could advise us.
Would that committee be under CAB's umbrella?
Yeah, that's another good question.
And also then we have 3 committees now.
Right.
So that would be a 4th committee. And at this point, members are only assigned to one of the 3 committees. So that we either change that requirement or make sure that we have a lot of other people who are not allocated to the 3 so that they could be on the 4th one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something to think about. It's a lot to think about.
I mean, I tend to lean towards it being outside of CAB, partially because of, what Patrice is speaking to, like, Measure X money, maybe dedicated to this area. And so I think it's been, really helpful that we've focused on it and we've, refreshed it and we've brought additional energy and attention. And so I would recommend, requesting for like a committee, a countywide committee, that fit, wherever it's going to fit in best with the different committees and spaces that are promoting this work and looking into it, and to identify the scope, like, are we putting restorative justice and diversion programs together? Are they separate? So we could say that in this meeting that's what that we're advocating for, a countywide committee to take this forward. Do folks feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, I'm new in this whole process, so I'm in a learning phase here, but Patrice, could that be under the CCP?
Yeah, I actually think it's definitely worth requesting that a CCP committee, because at this point, CCP only has 2 committees, right? It's CAB and then the Quality Assurance Committee. And so I would think then for whenever your restorative justice recommendation gets agendized on CCP, I think that's probably a great time to then make this request that CCP establishes a restorative justice committee to look at kind of holistically practices and programs to help, what would be the word for it, to help identify where investments could be made or should be made to employ more restorative justice programming. And I definitely think it aligns with the intention of AB 109. So it would not, if there was a concern about whether or not it's outside of the scope of what you all are attempting to do, or what the CCP is attempting to do, I think there's definitely direct alignment there.
Yeah, public safety is a primary interest to everyone. So,
Mhm.
so restorative justice certainly fits into that as far as I can see.
And are we speaking about restorative justice and other diversion programs, or do we want to focus this request to restorative justice? I think, if I take a deep breath and I think and I look inside, I would almost want it to be broad and to encompass restorative justice and to encompass diversion practices, because I do recognize that restorative justice can have some limitations, and in the criminal justice system, it's often utilized mostly outside of the court system, and after that process has already happened. So I guess I would want some good things to come out of there for everyone, for folks in reentry, and also, victims. So would you feel comfortable, or is there a way to focus on diversion and restorative justice?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it could be presented to the CCP that way, that it be a committee focusing on restorative justice and diversion. I like that idea.
So
Please.
I was going to say, unless you want me to wait till all the members speak, I have another idea.
Go for it. We like ideas. We need ideas.
Okay, so one thing to note is that there was the Racial Justice Oversight Body has a diversion subcommittee. So essentially, you do sort of have a countywide sort of space where diversion is being discussed. So instead of, which, by the way, quite a few of CCP members sit on the Racial Justice Oversight Body, though they may not all participate in the actual diversion subcommittee. But that said, if you wanted to create or wanted to request for the creation of a restorative justice subcommittee to CCP, you could, in that recommendation, could essentially say that there should be maybe some cross collaboration between that committee and the diversion committee for our job. That might be an opportunity. So that way folks are not feeling like they're having the same conversations in just two different places.
Right.
I like that idea a lot. And I know that I mentioned this before, that there are some limitations to restorative justice, and maybe it can work in certain circumstances and done in certain ways. And so, yeah, focus on restorative justice and also be informed with the work of the Racial Justice Oversight Body, so that there are some things that are agreed upon to move forward with and to implement. Thank you for that. Does somebody want to summarize what we're going to be recommending to the CCP at the next opportunity when this is agendized? All right, I'll jump in so we can keep moving here. So we'll be, oh yeah, I basically just said it, but that was my summary. Okay, so yeah, we're going to ask for a subcommittee to be created around restorative justice and to be in connection with the other subcommittee, the Racial Justice Oversight Body, around diversion. Thank you all. So we're moving through this document perfectly, and we're refining what we've learned. I'm sorry, can you go back up a little bit? Okay, so yeah, recommendations, okay, I like it. Observations, we can scroll down. Thank you. We were already there, Monique. Thank you. So this is just more information. We also took a look at the SIM map as one place to look for some of the services that might be offered in reentry to folks having different mental health issues, or wellness issues. So that ended up not totally linking into restorative justice because there were no restorative justice mentions in that document. Can you scroll down? Is there anything else that folks want to make sure that we capture around our restorative justice conversation before we switch gears to some definitions? Okay, great. So okay, this is our last agenda item on here. I might be bouncing around a little bit, but I will, just be transparent with folks. And, this meeting is gonna help us inform whether we're gonna have a next subcommittee meeting in December. And so I had wanted to have something in writing with these definitions. I feel like we had agreed that we needed to define restorative justice practices, and restorative justice circles. Those were some of the three interchangeable terms that we had been hearing. And so right here on this website, one of the definitions was provided for us. It's actually under, oh, sorry, I can't make that out here. Okay, so what is restorative practices? Thank you, right there. So that gives us a good definition of what restorative practices are. And I pulled up, some definitions for the other terms that I can share with folks. So practices, being about the relationship and the restoration of relationship, and this coming from indigenous communities, throughout the world where, maybe there was actually, no police force, etc. And so how did folks heal and make relationships right when harm had been done? Did you have something you wanted to say, Dale?
No, excuse me, I sneezed.
Okay, well, God bless.
I'll silence myself.
All righty. Thank you for that. Nice little sneeze there. So can we scroll down a little bit here? I hope folks can kind of see this. Yeah, basically, restorative practices has deep roots, with indigenous communities throughout the world. And it's an emerging social science that studies how to strengthen relationships between individuals as well as social connections and communities. Does that sound like a good enough, clear enough definition for us for restorative practices? Is that too vague or too broad? Go ahead, Patrice.
Okay, you saw me waiting to get in there. I think as a general concept, yes, that's pretty accurate. I think the way in which you'd like to see it employed in different settings is why the committee is worth exploring and having in place. Because there's, I believe it was Dante in a previous meeting that mentioned, there's the sort of mediation of conflict and repairing harm between, the individual that was harmed versus the person who committed the harm. And then there's actual circles, right, that allow for more of a, almost similar to a group processing type of way of doing restorative justice or employing a restorative practice. There's also instances where restorative practice can be employed through the actual agency itself as almost like an HR tool to help restore or reduce conflict in the workplace. So, so it doesn't have to just simply be for the clients itself, but then also to enhance the organizational culture of providers who are providing services to some of our clients. Again, kind of like walking the talk, if you will, or I'm so bad at cliches. What is it? Practice what you preach. There we go. Practicing what you preach. So yeah, so there's different things that can be explored. There's restorative arts that utilizes arts expression as a healing mechanism. So I'm in agreement with it as a general concept. And then when you get into the weeds of how of the types of programming or the types of or the ways in which you would like to see the practice being implemented in various organizations or throughout programs can be sort of deciphered and deliberated on through the committee.
Thank you for that. That's great feedback and really helpful. Anybody else have any comments or questions thus far? So I was able to find a couple more definitions. They were not on this website, but I can, put them into the chat or just verbally discuss, and we can, share out in whatever way is helpful. And I think this really, dovetails quite nicely, with what Patrice was just saying. So restorative justice can be even broader than restorative justice practices, right? Which is what we were just discussing. And, there were 3 pillars that were described by Howard Zephyr as harms and needs, obligations, and engagements. So this very broad framework, who was harmed, what was the harm, and how can it be repaired? Obligations, who is responsible and accountable, and how can they repair the harm? And engagement, victims and offenders have active roles in the justice process. I do like that last point, that it's an active process on both sides. So that was something that I wanted to add. Any questions or comments about that? Is it helpful if I share the link for that in the chat? Or do we want to move on to a definition of circles?
Well, I would like to see the link. I'll copy it and then can follow up on it.
Perfect. Okay, here it comes. And we can, have this in the notes too, if that's helpful, so that folks can refer to it there, or the outputs from our meeting. So restorative justice circles, in the definitions that I looked up for restorative justice circles, I found that distinction that Patrice is speaking to of, when some of these practices or are implemented. I will share the link to this as well, but as I mentioned prior, so not only are restorative justice practices, but also circles are found in Native American cultures of the United States and Canada and are used for many purposes. And their adaptation to the criminal justice system developed in the 1980s as First Nation peoples of the Yukon and local justice officials attempted to build closer ties between the community and the formal justice system. In 1991, Judge Barry Stewart of the Yukon Territorial Court introduced the sentencing circle as a means of sharing the justice process with the community. So I'll share the link for that. We have not been talking much about that. I feel like in our year of talking about restorative justice, we've not necessarily explored or seen that actually taking the place of sentencing or being part of the sentencing process. Although I'm sorry, that does seem to happen with some of the youth courts. We just haven't found that for adults. So here comes that next definition, or that next link into the chat. So I apologize. When you go to this, oh, is that going to be something real? Okay. When you go to that, it should say the site, but I just copied the actual direction of where I went to. So these are all different restorative justice websites from educational institutions or, mainly educational institutions. So that's the second one there. And then I had one more point on circles that I wanted to talk, and then we can talk about, and then we'll move forward. So restorative justice circles, as we have been discussing quite a bit, can provide an opportunity for community members to come together to address harmful behavior in a process that explores harms and needs, obligations, and necessary engagement. And circles bring all parties together to meet, talk about what happened, and settle on a plan to repair the harm. So that's, I think the common definition of restorative justice that we've been more focused on. Do folks have anything to say about that distinction of when the circles are happening? Okay. Thank you for putting up with my with all these different links up in here. Okay, so let's see. Do we want to include any of these additional definitions in our recommendations, either to the CCP or to the next subcommittee? Or do folks have any more thoughts or clarifications after hearing this discussion about definitions? And I can start with Dale and with Dr. Hernandez. And you could just say, that was a lot, Lila. You had us like.
Yeah, no,
I'm still trying to copy the links into that.
yeah,
I
me
got
too. I'm fine at this point.
Okay, great. So where do we want to go from here? We already have the CCP. We have some definitions. Do we want to have another meeting in December to come back to clarify our definitions, or is this going to be our last meeting of the year? I am conflating Agenda 5 and Agenda 6.
If our next meeting would be the same day and week as our November meeting, then it would be after the CCP meeting and after the CAB meeting. I don't know if that makes any difference, but.
Thank you. That stood out to me, and I thought, why would we want to have a meeting after our last general meeting? And I see Dr. Michelle shaking her head. So it sounds like we are going to be good with this as the last meeting for our subcommittee this year. And so I just want to see if we need anything else about the definitions, or, you know, at this point, we're going to request the committee, and the committee can also, you know, provide their definitions and their scope.
Or are we not going to have a meeting on December 16?
How we're leaning right now. Yeah, we're not going to have a meeting on the 16th unless anybody here has, we're not going to have a meeting. Because Dale, that's what you suggested, and Dr. Hernandez was in agreement, so am I. So
I wonder if there's anything that would come up from the CAB meeting and the CCP meeting that we might need to consider, but I guess we could do that in January, huh?
yeah, I think we could. Yeah, great question, and yeah. ORJ, are you seeing anything else that you need us all to complete? I know that there's some documentation. We need to do like a summary of the year for the next year, and you know, we have our work plan. Monique and Patrice, anything else that you all see that we need? And Nicole, anything else that you all need from us?
The only thing I think we would need is, yes, your report out for the next general body meeting. And then I'm not sure if Monique or Nicole talked to you and other chairs about process for putting this final annual report together. But I'd venture to say that maybe in your report out for the next general body meeting, it might be worth it to also include in there your sort of like your recap of the year. So that way it's already done, and then we could just pull from that and put it together in the annual report. Does that work for you guys, Monique and Nicole, or was there another process? I don't want to interfere with the
Yeah,
development
that's
process.
fine. I mean, that basically covers it, right?
Yeah.
And then you can review it as a full body, which I think is healthy. Do that.
Sounds good. Are there, okay. So we've got two things kind of in the hopper right now. One of them is, you know, where we're leaving our discussion of restorative justice definitions. Are we, is there anything else that folks want to add or clarify, or are we leaving that where it is?
I don't have anything to add.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add either.
Okay, great. So are there any experiences from this year that you all would like to make sure, you know, besides the document that we just reviewed for restorative justice that is included? Anything else that you want to make sure gets in that summary? And I think we will add this recommendation that we're making to the CCP regarding this subcommittee as well. And this can be restorative justice or otherwise. All right, well, we will do, myself and Nicole will do our best to take lessons learned, you know, basically a little summary. Next year, the subcommittee will be putting out the survey. We didn't have to do that this year. And so that'll be a focus of the subcommittee for next year. And yeah, you all will have a chance to see that in the full body CAB with that agenda. So if something comes up, you can send an email to myself or to Nicole. We just can't email all of each other so that we're not making a small meeting, is I think how it works.
Do you
And
want
to
to
clarify,
include
you're
this-
saying Nicole, to clarify, you're saying Nicole Green?
Nicole Green, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, got to get the right Nicole in there.
The only question I had, this document on the restorative justice recommendations, was that a document that you wanted to distribute to the full body, or is that just more kind of notes internally?
Mhm. The summary document that we reviewed today.
Yeah.
It's very rough, but I feel like if we're going to the CCP and we're asking them to create a committee, they probably want to see something written from us. Can we add in our final recommendation, and would ORJ make that look like something presentable for us?
Yeah, so because we don't know yet what the meeting schedules will be for the next year, where your restorative justice recommendation will land. And you know, it's a quarterly schedule, so you have I guess the first meeting will probably be in March, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a March meeting, June, September, November, and then December is the extra one. So somewhere along those lines, wherever it lands and we get that information up front, then yeah, we'll work with you guys to put something together, even if it's just a quick, like, we can include it even in a staff report and just have that be a memo that will include your recommendation for a committee.
Those those months that you mentioned, Patrice, is that for the CCP meetings?
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
Great, and I will be on the CAB next year, as will other members of this subcommittee. So we'll show up for this when it comes up for the CCP. And good work, folks. Thank you for diving into this. Thank you for showing up to the meetings. Thank you for hanging in there, asking questions, learning hard things. And really leaning in for our community and for all folks who are impacted by the criminal justice system. So thank you. Anyone have anything else that they would like to say before we close
I-
out the year?
I have a question. So
Okay, sorry.
Patrice, the December 3rd CCP, is that agendized for them to go over the policy brief?
I don't know if it's going to be where they go over the policy brief again. I can find out from Paul. I know he'll be putting out the CCP packet. He's hoping to put it out by tomorrow, if not early next week. So
The only reason
to
I
my knowledge,
ask is maybe someone from the subcommittees should be designated to present the discussion item about the subcommittee of restorative justice subcommittee, or lead that
I would
discussion.
say, I would recommend that they wait till they actually agendize that specific recommendation. So there's ample time given to it, because this December meeting, as you know, most of the focus is really going to be on adopting the budget proposals and recommending it to PPC, and then the CCP implementation plan. So just in terms of strategy, I think if you want to give a lot of attention to this and is hoping for a really robust conversation on this particular item, then do that for when it'll get agendized. Because otherwise, they're going to look at all of the recommendations at once. Even if it is agendized for a December meeting, they're looking at all of the recommendations at once. And I'm sure that the full CAB wants all of those things to be considered. But for you guys, it sounds like this is something you really want to take time into and have a robust conversation. So
Yeah,
that would
I
be,
think it's the
yeah.
first, I think it's the first recommendation. So if they went in order, it would come up first. That's why I was suggesting maybe at least a backup plan that someone's designated to be there at least from this group.
That's a good point. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, okay, yeah, that conflicts with all staff meeting at my organization. This happens quite frequently. Sorry, what time was that on December 3rd?
Friday,
10
December
o'clock.
3rd at 10:30, right?
No,
10:30?
it got moved up to 10.
Okay.
10 o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody else feel like they would like to go to that and feel comfortable if there's an opportunity to put in our advocacy for this committee?
I like the way you've expressed everything. I think you should be the spokesperson.
Yeah, okay, I will maybe be there. Sorry to yeah, wrap this whole process up with a resounding maybe. I will look into that, and Dr. Hernandez, if you want to go there, you know, just be there.
Yeah.
Okay, you can
If you can do it, Lila, I'll do it. Okay,
oh, you can. Okay.
Yeah. okay,
If you could plan to be there, that would be awesome. And, you know, if I can show up, then it'll be a surprise.
okay, all right.
Any other questions about the upcoming CCP meeting on Friday? Did anybody else have any other comments or questions before we wrap up this year? We will not be having a December programs and services subcommittee after our regular CAB meeting.
And I believe the next one, the way that this landed last year is that we had the retreat in January, and then the first subcommittee meeting was like February.
That
I
makes sense.
think that's probably what's going to end up happening with this one as well.
Got it. And it might be new members and all that kind of stuff. Okay.
Would the January meeting, Nicole, be the same day and week as we have been meeting?
For the general meeting, for the retreat?
Yeah,
The retreat, one of the days will be a general cadence meeting on that second Thursday, and I believe it's a 2-day usually. So I don't believe it always follows the next day always, so it'll be most likely a special meeting for the second part.
And in January, do we usually have a CAB meeting?
Yes, because
Okay.
you guys will be nominating your officers, your chair, vice chair, and secretary in that meeting.
Thank you for helping us get ready for the next year.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's adjourn this meeting a few minutes early so Nicole doesn't have to, you know, sneak off to her other meeting before it's over. Thank you all so much. Be safe, be well, and see folks. Oh, Patrice.
Just really, really quick, I do want to just acknowledge and share my admiration for all of the committee members, especially around your work on restorative justice. As a former CAB member myself, I remember when it was just starting to get, talked about, and the way in which you guys have kind of taken it up again and given it some legs. Please know it's really admirable to see that. So if at any moment you're kind of feeling like, oh, I don't know what we're doing, I don't know how to direct this, just know you guys are doing a fantastic job and have been doing a fantastic job. And so I appreciate you all's leadership over the last year, really moving some of this work forward.
Thank you so much. That is warming my heart and so beautifully said and affirming. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
that's a good endorsement.
Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe you can say that at the CCP meeting for us.
Not a problem.
Oh, thank you, Patrice. Thank you all. Yes, we have accomplished and dove into important issues here and topics, including restorative justice. Anything else? All right, we're adjourned then. Thank you all.
Have a great weekend.
Take care. Bye.